Hey creatives, it's Adrienne Lloren and welcome to Spiritual Superheroes, the show where we talk about how you can step into your inner greatness and unleash your soul's creative calling. Today we have Jennifer Browdy in the building. Do you want to say hi?
Hi.
So, a little quick introduction about Jennifer. She is an associate professor of comparative literature and media arts at Bard College at Simon Rocks in Western Massachusetts, and coined the term Purposeful Memoir in her award-winning writer's guide, The Elementary Journey of Purposeful Memoir, a Writer's Companion. Her memoir, What I Forgot and Why I Remembered, was one of 6 memoir finalists of the 2018 International Book Awards. The editor of 3 anthologies of global women's writing, an online magazine fired up creative expression for challenging times. She offers workshops in purposeful memoir along with coaching, manuscript review, and publishing services at Green Fire Press. So please welcome Jennifer Browdy.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm so delighted to be here.
I'm really excited to dig into what we're going to dig into today, because this collection of conversations is really all about like conscious conversations about creativity. And with you today, Jennifer, we're going to be delving into the alchemy of purposeful memoir writing. And maybe before we dig into that, I would love to hear, like, for you, what does alchemy mean to you? I think it kind of means different things for people, but like for you, what does that mean?
Yeah, that's a good place to start. It means transformation, you know. So it has a long, deep history, and I've actually been digging into a little Jung lately, because Jung famously wrote a couple of 3 actually very dense, long books about alchemy. And he took it all the way back to Egypt and then, studied the history of alchemy going forward. And basically there are 2 branches of historical alchemy. One is physical, like actually turning stone to gold, right? And the other was philosophical and finding, the philosopher's stone, which is like beauty, truth, transcendence. So he pinpointed a time in the early 19th century when those 2 paths parted, and physical alchemy turned into chemistry. And we know where chemistry has led us, right? Not to a really wonderful place at this time in the 21st century. But the philosophy track of alchemy has kept going, and we're still seeking to understand the mystery of life and the mystery, the meaning of life, the purpose of life. So that's the part of alchemy that interests me, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'm really fascinated by what we can learn by going back through our individual lives, and just sort of exploring, and not only exploring what is, but actually also thinking about what could be or what could have been. So that's also part of the alchemy. I write memoir and I also write fiction, and I'm interested in the line between those 2 things.
The line between those things, that's so fascinating, because I was talking about that idea with my roommate. We obviously talk a lot. And one of the things that we were talking about was, like, even in our spiritual journeys, we have such like incredible visions through lucid dreamings, or just actually receiving visions and memories from past lives. And if I don't know where you draw the line at that, but that's something that we were talking about, was that idea of, like, yeah, where does the line draw, like fiction, and where does that line draw? Because it's like sometimes these things that we're seeing and experiencing that is actually our truth and reality seems like movie stuff, hence like superhero stuff. So it's really cool. And so digging into a bit more about the purpose side of things, because as I think as creatives, we're always like searching, like there's this, like, everybody's like searching for something bigger in life, something of purpose, of passion. And I was kind of hitting this notion of like, I don't know if we're meant to keep searching outwardly for our passions. Maybe we should actually search like inwardly for our purpose. And so I would love to hear on your end, like the beauty and the profoundness of actually like looking into our own stories and the profound messages that we can hear about ourselves through that.
Yeah. So, I mean, I could talk a little bit about my own story as an example.
Sure.
I really wrote my memoir to kind of walk the talk, you know, to put in practice what I was thinking about in terms of other people's memoirs, which, you know, as a scholar of literature, I spent many years analyzing other people's memoirs. It took me a long time to get to the point where I was ready to write my own. And it was really at a moment where I was searching for my own purpose, right? My own meaning. So I ended up by quite a circuitous route, getting back to this memory in childhood, which was the moment when I became a writer. And must have been very soon after I learned how to write. I was about probably 6 or 7. And I was out in the woods, and I had I don't know what you would call it, maybe a lucid dream or a vision or a connection with a wood nymph. And she came to me with the name Estrella. And I didn't speak Spanish in those days, although Spanish became important to me later. But that was her name. And she was very upset about logging and cutting of the forests. And that was that was the topic of my first story as a child, was this wood nymph named Estrella calling together a group of animals and giving them the mission, how to stop the logging. But I never finished the story because I couldn't imagine how. Like, I didn't have a solution at age 7 for how to stop the logging. I just knew it was important. So I had totally forgotten that. And in the process of Purposeful Memoir, in the process of exploring my life story, it came back to me. And it was very important, actually, you know. And it was, so I was able to circle around. And I think of Purposeful Memoir as a spiraling journey. So I spiraled back around to that really core value of mine, which is the environment. And so that led to, for example, founding Fired Up magazine, you know, which is a place where anybody can write about what they're fired up in terms of social and environmental justice and the way those two things go together. But I don't know that I would have gotten there without taking that long and circuitous and kind of contemplative journey of memoir writing. So having done that for myself, then I really wanted to share that with others. And that's been part of my mission too lately.
Because I feel like so many people do feel, and I was in that place too, where it's like, man, I just innately feel like I'm really called to do something great, like for the world. And nature definitely spoke to me a lot too. Like, I grew up in the Philippines, so I was always by the ocean and always like in the gardens and like listening to like the rustlings of the wind, and always felt so connected to that, and feeling like, yeah, there is like this deeper purpose here, but it's like, how do I get started? Where do I go? What really is my purpose? Like, you just have that feeling, and then you're like, well, I don't know. And an interesting thing that I'm drawing out from your sharing is that there's so much power in actually just relooking, like relooking in our lives, and like, what were these moments that you felt like, yeah, I am on purpose, even though we can't like say it immediately, like, this is my purpose in life. But it's like, you have these moments where you're like, yeah, I did feel in tune. I did feel like I was doing something good for the world.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is you can totally forget about them. So it really, you know, it takes a little, it's like excavation work to go back and back. It's not something that can be rushed. And I think that's one of the ways that this work is a little bit out of sync with our our culture now, which is so fast and everything has to be fast. And, there's a pill for that, but this is slow and contemplative, and it can't be rushed.
Mm-hmm.
So in my writer's companion, actually, which is this little book, it's a year-long guide. So it's arranged by year, and there are 3 prompts for each month, and it's a spiraling journey through the elements. And I really imagine that if you spent a year just working through those prompts slowly and thoughtfully, you would find yourself in a very different place at the end of that year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm just looking at because you are sharing a portion of this with the viewers today, and I'm just like looking at it on my screen, and it's like the different themes that you're going to be going into, like dreaming deep, looking for love, sap rising, fueling your creative fires, the warmth of childhood, cultivating a life, learning and unlearning, reaching for the light, in the gardens of memory, right where you are, veils between worlds, and taking stock of the journey. And it's making me present to offline. We talked about a little bit briefly into this, and you actually mentioned that there's like earth years, and there's water years, and there's fire years, and air years, in different moments that the elements teach us about ourselves through our stories. Can we delve into that world?
Yeah. So there are earth years and fire years, but I'm actually, what I'm following in this particular book is months. So there are earth months, fire months. It kind of corresponds to the zodiac. And in the back of the book, I have a zodiac chart. So Capricorn is an earth month, and Aquarius is an air month, and so on. So in my framework of Purposeful Memoir, which I came to in this intuitive way as I wrote my own memoir, earth represents childhood, and water represents teenage and young adult years, so roughly 13 to 23. So earth is like the ground of our being, and that is an incredibly important time to explore. And I find when I give memoir workshops, people are just astounded at what they find, what comes up for them as they write about their childhoods. I mean, there's endless material there. So that's like the ground, the foundation. And in my memoir, that's the longest section too. Water, childhood, adolescence, we enter the cultural stream. We swim with the tide, or we start sputtering and going against the flow, or we find our own little tributaries. We go off by ourselves. So water seems like a good metaphor for those years where we're exploring in so many ways. So, of course, one of the big things that we do in those years is education. And as a teacher, education is really of interest to me. So we delve a lot into education in those water prompts, and education of many different kinds, not just traditional, conventional education. I'm really interested in initiation of various kinds and the lack thereof in Western culture. We can talk about that. Fire as an element is passion. It's also trials and tribulations. So those things can come up at any time of life. So you can find fire in the earth years and in the water years. And for me, personally, most of my fire came, or I became more aware of my passions. And I certainly encountered trials and tribulations as an adult. So for me, that was fire came to the fore in adulthood. And then air is the space of reflection. So how we live our lives, and we're constantly commenting, and our own self-commentary, our reflection about life as we live it and as we look back on it. So air for me is this really important process of reflection. In my memoir, it spiraled through all the other sections. And so the book, the yearly guide to Purposeful Memoir, is spirals through those elements, those life stories, life stages, and it also, in something that I didn't make explicit when I wrote the book, but is that there are 3 prompts per month.
Mm.
And they represent the personal, the political, and the planetary aspects of our experience. And one thing that I've come to feel more and more strongly as I've worked with this material is that to understand our lives fully, we need to align those realms. So we have our personal experience that's played out against a social landscape,
Mm-hmm.
the political, the web of relationships with other people, and historical facts, and just events that take place during our lives that impact us. And then the planetary is our relationship to place, which we often give very short shrift to. It's often like the backdrop. It's
It's like we almost forget it's there.
yeah.
Yet without it, like what where would we be?
We couldn't take a single breath, without these trees.
Yeah.
So I try to foreground that. So each of the 3 prompts in each month goes through those different levels.
Cool. We opened up so many new doors to go into this conversation with what you just shared. But an area that I want to like circle back on, since we're on this theme of spiraling. So in the fire years, you mentioned this is like where passion comes, where trials and tribulations come. And something interesting that I just recently learned was that passion, like if we go to like the root of like what that word means, it actually means to suffer. So I thought it was so interesting, like this imagery of like fire, passion, and then I'm also circling back into alchemy, where it's like alchemy, a lot of it is like how do we, like it's using fire to like transform, turn things into different states. And so the area that I want this conversation to kind of flow into is like, in life, it's not always going to be rainbows and butterflies. It's not always going to be these fairy nymphs telling, like even that, the fairy nymphs coming to tell you, I was like, that wasn't like sunshines and butterflies. It was like, hey, please save the earth, And so in these moments of like trials and like negativity that really, really can actually really bring us down, that we feel like we want to completely give up. We don't know if we're good enough for what's going on. So many different traumas that can happen that take us off of our path and like take us away from taking action in our path. So like bringing back that conversation of like alchemy, it's like, how do we go from being in a negative space or a darker space and like actually being our own alchemist and turning that into something positive, something that actually contributes to the world, and turning all that pain into something beautiful we can offer.
Yeah, that's exactly the path of Purposeful Memoir that I have been leading people on. And it's true that, when for instance, if I gather a group of women together, which I have done many times, they're bringing their pain, all of us are wounded in some way. And it's amazing how much it helps to share the pain in a circle, in a supportive circle. So that's part of what I do. And then what I tell people, there are two things. One thing is that the process of Purposeful Memoir is really useful whether or not you intend to publish a memoir. So it's partly just a contemplative practice that's different than journaling, because journaling is sort of off the cuff writing. It's like you write whatever is on your mind today, right? This is a little more intentional than that. It really is starting in childhood and thinking about different stages in your life and thinking about life as a journey. So it's more intentional than that, but it doesn't have to be published. A lot of people will like just freeze up when it comes to thinking of actually sharing this material with the wider world. So that's one thing. And then for those who do really feel like they have a story that they want to share, I encourage people to think about purposeful memoir, the part of the purpose is you're sharing your story for the benefit of others to make their life journeys easier. So to shed some light for other people on what they're going through. So I'm often working with people, I would say in their 50s and above, so older people, people who've lived and suffered and feel like they have some wisdom to share, you know. And so part of what another way that this is a little bit countercultural, this work, is our society tends to kind of focus on youth, you know. It's like youth is where it's at, and not have a lot of patience for listening to the stories of elders. But I think that there's a lot of wisdom in those stories. So part of my mission is just kind of helping people to open that up, see the value in their own stories, understand that they really have learned something in this lifetime that's worth sharing, and then go ahead and do it, you know. So part of it is confidence. So in my Alchemy series, my new series of workshops, what I tried to do is flip it a little bit, and each of those workshops is focusing on something we want. So it's like the goal of the alchemy. So yes, we're going to talk about where we feel vulnerable, but the goal is seeking strength, or seeking confidence, or seeking acceptance, you know. So each of those, I have 12 of those workshops, and each one is seeking the goal of this alchemical process. And we have to go through the process. We have to start with where we are, wherever we are. But to be clear that the point of doing this is not to wallow about in our pain and suffering, you know, but to, yes, ignite our passion and like use all this as a springboard to move out more strongly into the world and into our life's journey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so interesting how powerful our stories are. Mm-hmm. And sometimes we get so lost in our own worlds that we don't realize the gift it is when we share it. So many people can actually learn from your story, and so much of my journey has evolved because of like these what if questions that I just like stumble upon, right? And so like one of them is kind of like, well, what if like me writing my story has actually absolutely nothing to do with me? What if me sharing my story has everything to do with like contributing?
Well, that's right.
Yeah, and that's kind of what you're getting me present to, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I actually think that a lot of it is getting our egos out of the way, you know, and just sort of opening ourselves up as a channel to what wants to come through us. And our life is we constantly are going back and forth between being open in that way and sort of acting from intuition, right? And just kind of going with the flow. And it's amazing where we can go if we relax and just let it happen. And then being tight and being worried and being shy, you know, and unsure, all those other things. So a lot of what I'm trying to do is excavate those stories, get people to focus on where things were going well, you know, and then amplify that. And to understand that when we do that, we benefit everyone. This is not like an egotistical kind of journey here.
Yeah, and like you're getting me present to a story that I feel called to share right now, because this was like a moment of like alchemy for me. And I remember I was sharing a story with a friend, and I was talking about, so I went through like sexual trauma as a child, and I was like something that I kept a secret for a very long time and didn't know how to ask for help, didn't know how to I just didn't know how to get help from that. And so I kept it a secret for a very long time. And it was my music that was like my therapy and my poetry. So I would write, you know, everything that I was like feeling, and then kind of get mad and like, you know, throw it away or something. But I would just create art just to heal me. And I remember sharing that part of my life story with somebody, and they were like, well, I'm so sorry that happened to you. That shouldn't have happened to you. I wish that never happened to you.
Mm.
And I was kind of like, no, I'm actually very grateful that that happened to me, because later down in my life, I was able to use that story and actually help people. What had happened was, like, because music had helped me, then I had another what if moment. And I was like, well, what if, like, if music can help me, like, what if I shared it? What would happen?
Mm-hmm.
And so I actually had this opportunity to speak to, like, high school students. I was like a wee day event, and I was one of their, like, performers. And so I had a moment, like 10 minutes to share my story, and then a few moments to share some music. And I shared, like, a spoken word piece that I had written that was about that tough time and about how music got me to express it, and how that had helped me. And in the moment, I was like, I don't know, man, like, I was just like, in that moment, I was looking at these kids and I was like, man, like, when I was their age, like, life was so hard for me, but it was, like, so secretly, like, everybody thought I was happy. But for
Mm.
me, I was like, man, life is so hard. And so I was like, I don't know, maybe this might just actually connect with someone tonight. I don't know. But kind of what you were saying of, like, just listen to those intuitions, listen to those guidance, because there was a part of me, I was like, well, this topic's kind of heavy. I don't know, like, if kids can handle this. Then I was like, well, okay, I was kind of going through this stuff, so I think they can handle this. So I just felt called to share, and I did. And, like, to kind of, like, wrap up this story was, like, at the end, I didn't know if I made an impact or not, but I've shared my story. But later in the evening, like, I had young girls, like, messaging me on Instagram later and saying, thank you so much for sharing your story. I finally had the courage to tell my mom what's going on. Thank you so much for sharing my story. I finally went to I went to the guidance counselor to get some help. Thank you. And I was like, whoa, I had no idea that sharing my story could do that. And had that not happened in my life, like this friend was suggesting, like, I wish that never happened in your life. I was like, I would never have the moment to empower these girls to make a difference in their journeys. So just getting so present to, like, the power of our story. And we take, like, when we don't do these practices that you're teaching of, like, really getting present to our purpose, really getting present to our stories, we take for granted our power. We take for granted the difference we can actually make.
Well, we don't step into the potential of our power.
Yeah.
The ripples you're describing from that, from your life story, are so powerful, right? But if you hadn't shared, they wouldn't have gone out that way. So, yeah, I think, well, I wish that never happened to you. You know, I mean, we all wish that we had, you know, wonderful, perfect childhoods and lives. It would be great. But given that we don't live in a perfect world, whatever happens to us has value, has meaning, you know, and has importance to others who may be going through similar life journeys. And it's so important for people to realize that they're not alone. You know, and that's, I think it's a paradoxical thing about social media. I think on the one hand, wow, these girls could reach right out to you and give you instant feedback and thank you, you know. On the other hand, sometimes it can be even more isolating, it seems, you know, the social media thing. So even though I super appreciate being able to talk to you like this via computer, you know, I also think there's still really great value in coming together in person. So you did in that high school auditorium or wherever you were. Yeah.
Yeah, it's completely, like, different experience to be able to experience people, like, face to face. For sure. Wow, that went deep, and now I don't know where we're going.
That's alchemy, right?
Yeah, let's alchemy. Do you feel called to share, to bring this conversation somewhere?
Well, you also don't, we don't know where we're going, right? And that's as it should be. That's as it must be. And all we can do is, as you keep saying, stay present to what's unfolding, and try to show up in our strongest version of ourselves, you know, for each moment.
Yeah.
So that's, I think, what alchemy, the alchemy of purposeful memoir, can help us look back over our lives and where we have shown up with power, right? Or where we have not. And take learn from both the good, the bad, the strong, the vulnerable aspects of our lives, and move forward with more intention, more clarity, more purpose. So the other thing that's a little bit paradoxical about purposeful memoirs, it's not just about looking back.
Yeah.
It's about understanding the present and then moving with intention into the future.
Yeah, I love that, because as you were sharing, I'm a very visual person. So as you're sharing, like, things are like coming to me as visions. So we're like in this present moment. This is actually where we are right now. Like, that's all we have right now, this moment.
Mm-hmm.
And when we like retrace our stories, I just had this vision of all these like threads that are kind of like floating through into our past. And like the nature of threads too is like, it's like the more that like cluster kind of around together, they become stronger. And what's just coming to me is like, I feel like there must be like, this thread in our past of like, I don't know if it's like identity, but there's this thread that is like so essential in our journey. And I kind of did this exercise a while back. It was like a marketing exercise, actually, where we were trying to figure out, what's your message? What do you want to share?
Mm-hmm.
And so we re-looked at these different moments in our life and looked for what the thread is that kind of ties them in, because sometimes we feel like, man, I'm so confused, I don't know what we're doing. Or sometimes we get to a space that we're like creating something and we actually just want to transform. We want to go somewhere completely new, but we're like, well, I don't know. And like studying these threads are so powerful, because what had opened up for me in that assignment was that, oh my gosh, every time I was just on this like pursuit of happiness, like I always used like bliss as my compass, and like that is what opened up for me. And I was like, well, exactly what you said, like, well, now that I'm aware, that that's my strength, that I always stand in my power when I'm following what actually really makes me happy, when I'm doing the things that embody that and inspire everybody around me to like, actually embody their happiness, and not just like this facade version of it or a materialist version of it, but actually like, genuine happiness. Like, that's such a gift that I don't think everybody actually gets to experience and be present to a lot. But now, like, being aware of that thread in my journey, I can use that powerfully in the future. So it's like really like you're just driving it really home for me, like that like, yeah, memoir sounds like we're just in the past, but that's the thing with time too, right? Like, everything is actually so interconnected.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's about understanding the past in order to move forward with more clarity, more focus, more intention, more self-understanding, like you're describing. Yeah. So one of the actually the first alchemy workshop that I'm going to do in June is seeking joy.
Oh, yay.
The first one. And I'm doing it on the summer solstice, which for me is always a very high energy moment, and I think people, well, in the US certainly, and maybe in many parts of the world, and people are just worried and uptight and stressed out, right? We don't take a lot of time to just follow our bliss, like you're talking about, or we don't know where it lies. We don't know, what makes us happy, really. So I just want to lead a workshop in thinking about, well, what did make me happy as a child? Because that's where the authentic, pure self gets its start, right? So, even if it was just something as simple as standing under a tree and looking up at the wind and the leaves, that made me really happy as a child. So how can I put more of that kind of happiness into my life now and going forward? So that's the the alchemy, looking back in order to make the future brighter, better, more joyful.
Because we're always creating it.
Mm-hmm.
Always creating it. So this has been such a beautiful conversation about alchemy and purpose and re-looking into our stories and looking into our stories with new eyes, with new lenses. And I would love to hear, like, kind of just to sum this all up, why do you feel like this journey of like going through that purposeful memoir is so important?
Well, like I was saying, I think that we are in a rush as a culture now. You know, we're rushing into the future. We're sometimes, you know, people have a meditation practice, or they may slow down enough to try to get present. But there's not a lot of space made for really looking back and evaluating where we've come from, how we've gotten to where we are, what have been the major signposts on our journey, what have been the watershed moments, you know, who have been the really important teachers in our lives. And sometimes we learn, like you were saying, through pain. That's, you know, the wound is the place where the light enters, as Ruth said. So just to slow down and take the time to, and I think you can do this profitably at any time of life, but certainly by the time you get to, you know, the ripe old age of 30 or so, you've got a lot of life under your belt already, and it's a good time to look back. And I find, you know, why do I use writing? I am a writer, so that's my creative practice. But I also think that when we write freely, so I do a process of focus-free writing, stuff comes up that surprises us, you know? So it's, and writing at once is liberating and also kind of freezes that stuff on the page, so then we can go back and look at it again and keep learning from it. And of course, share it if we want to. So, you know, that's not for everyone, but I do think that memoir is a popular genre now for a reason. People are hungry to learn from each other's stories and to really go deep and, you know, for really honest stories. So there's a need for that in the culture, and this answers that need.
Beautiful. And so a lot of the people that are, you know, attracted to this series and listening in right now do feel called, that they have this purpose and this calling to share that purpose. So for those that are interested in exploring this creative avenue of sharing their story through memoirs, you're actually offering them a free gift of the introduction of the Elemental Journey of Purposeful Memoir. So everybody that feels called to start writing down their stories, and you can download that here.
Yeah, I also have I have an online course in Purposeful Memoir that's on Thinkific, the Thinkific platform. And my Alchemy series is going to be available as an online series as well as in person. So yeah, I really welcome people to contact me, and we're all on the journey together. And it's my honor to accompany you all.
Yeah, and I'm like getting goosebumps just thinking about, like, this is such an awesome community that's being built right now, and I just know there's these like incredible stories that are just waiting to be unleashed. So if you're having that feeling as you're listening, that like, yup, I need to share my story, then definitely, you know, get connected with Jennifer. Like, start taking that, be the alchemist in your journey, like to really spark change and be that superhero for you and share your story. That's what I feel called to share right now. Do you have any final words you want to share, Jennifer, before we wrap up?
I just want to, you know, we haven't actually talked about superheroes. But I just want to say that I love this idea of spiritual superheroes. And I think we all are superheroes, and we all are creative. Everyone has the potential to tap into that creative energy and to share it as a superpower. So I'm so thrilled that you're encouraging this showering of energy out into the world. It's terrific.
Because we so need it right
We
now.
need it. Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the things that excite me so much. It's, it's all about ordinary people who just have this calling of living an extraordinary life mission. And they do it. Like that little, I keep thinking about the nymph fairy. They're like, no, we got to stop the lodging. We got to save the world. And, a part of me, it's like, oh, that kind of sounds silly, but it's also like, well, no, that's the magic of it all. Like, like we have this planet, we're on here, we're meant to be the saviors of it, we're meant to be the superheroes for it. And creativity is like such a superpower to save the world. That's literally like what I feel like. I'm like, man, we're saving the world.
Yeah.
Every time we share our story, every time we make a little ripple effect, like,
Absolutely.
Beautiful.
Yes. It starts in the personal, and then it ripples out.
And I love that you like encapsulate all that. It's like the person, the politics, the planetary, all. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it so much. Thank you so much, Jennifer, for this
awesome
conscious conversation on creativity. I'm sure it has sparked a lot in the viewers, and I'm excited to hear what gets created.
Me too. I'm excited to be part of this community. Yes.
Spiritual superheroes. Bam, bam, bam. I gotta actually come up with a fancy jingle, unless I'm just gonna keep saying that. So thank you so much, everybody, tuning in to the Spiritual Superheroes series. I hope you feel inspired and empowered to go and be your own superhero, because you already are. So you just gotta be. And on that note, I'm just looking at your trees, and I want to be out in the trees. So we're going to get out of here and let you go off and go create powerfully.
All right. Thank you, Adrienne.
My absolute pleasure, Jennifer. Okay. Take care, everybody. Bye.
Bye.